as you rest as the field of awareness that you are, and you are resting in your divine presence, you begin to see all of the content, for lack of a better word, the content of your reality, which is your body, your emotions, and I'm saying your loosely. It's not your body. You are not the body. You are the awareness. You are the divine presence, and the body exists within you. The thoughts exist within you. The emotions exist within you. They're like clouds passing in the sky. When you're operating from your divine presence, they can arise and dissolve very easily and be seen through very easily because there's no longer a separate sense of self that is clinging to it, trying to fix it, trying to figure it out, unravel it, and make it mean something. It's seen very clearly, the frequency of what is being purged and purified. And this purification process goes on for however long it goes on, and it can continue to go on. Everything that is not useful and in alignment with unity consciousness, so anything that is in disharmony with that will naturally arise to be purified. So you may be going through the thick of the purification phase, meaning you've already gone through deep dark night of the soul, the relinquishing phase where you get stripped of all of your attachments and codependent love and your abandonment wounds get triggered. And this is likely years after being on a quote unquote spiritual path, spiritual awakening, which may have happened for you just recently or years ago. So it depends. Take this how it resonates. There are a large wave of the collective that I'm tapping into right now that have been on this journey for a long time. This quote unquote spiritual journey. So you may have had like you may have been part of the wave and collective that started to wake up more consciously to their power in their divine power in 2012. There was a huge wave and collective that woke up during that time, and it's been in waves ever since, and it's going to be increasingly in waves moving forward at an accelerated pace as we collectively shift into new earth frequency. Everything's going to be accelerating moving forward. That's what's coming through. So regardless, this will still be useful to you because none of these phases are like cut and dry lines between them. They overlap and and you can spiral through them. So you may revisit things that you thought, you may revisit certain themes as you move through this journey. And I don't even like saying the word journey, but it appears as a journey and it's necessary until it's not necessary anymore. And so for some of you tuning into this, the journey is very necessary. So maybe you had your spiritual awakening, which was filled with a lot of spiritual experiences, Kundalini awakening, ayahuasca trips, like out of body experiences, visualizations, all of your clairs waking up, all of your intuitive gifts, your psychic gifts, and all these kind of things happening. Telepathy, precognition, all of the things. Your heightened interest in spiritual things, energy healing, blah, 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 all the things. And this was very much the beginning of the breakdown of the egoic framework and really starting to decondition you from the matrix, even though it's prior to shit really hitting the fan because you're just diving in so much to all of the light frequency activations and energy healings and meditation groups and blah, 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 all the things. So you're still like high on all of this energy that you're now experiencing and all of the cool spiritual experiences. The 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 thing that can happen on that journey is you can get hooked on the spiritual experiences and think that you're now awakened because you've had spiritual experiences, and that is not your true nature. Spiritual experiences are not your true nature. Sorry if that burst your bubble, but it doesn't matter how many out of body experiences you have or how many psychic visions you have or anything like that, or how many angels have visited you and this and that. Those are spiritual experiences, and this spiritualized ego will end up being your bottleneck later on. And it's almost like the more spiritually aware you are, the more this can be the case, because the spiritual ego will come in the back door and it'll latch on and cling to things that are fun. And there's nothing wrong with this phase of the journey. I'm just sharing. So if this resonates with you, this can be this is essential part of the quote unquote spiritual journey. But there is the risk of your spiritual ego coming in the back door, identifying with yourself as a coach or a teacher or a healer or some kind of, you know, multi-dimensional this or that, which is totally fine. Like, obviously, we're not just this human experience, and so that it serves a beautiful purpose. But the spiritual ego will take everything and use it to its advantage on this journey, and it will eventually become a crutch and a bottleneck to your next level of ascension and self-actualization on this quote unquote journey, if that makes sense. So I'm just going down the rabbit hole with this. I didn't know where this video was going to go, but I was being called to talk about these different phases in air quotes because, like I said, there's no hard lines between this, but just bear with me. So there's that phase. You begin to open up where you're high on the light and you're high on the frequency and you're high on the Kundalini opening and you're high on all the new energy and all your cool spiritual gifts. But what's really happening is the egoic structures are beginning to break down, and you're beginning to the matrix is it's loosening its grip. And you may have had a lot of tower moments during that phase as well. So, but nonetheless, there is definitely this opening that seems to occur. And then you move into more of the relinquishing phase. And the relinquishing phase is where you really get stripped of your attachments and codependent love, and your abandonment wounds are triggered. And every place that you've been seeking outside of yourself for external validation or approval, all of that gets reflected back to you, and the rug gets pulled out from under you over and over and over again, because as an old soul, as a chosen one on this journey, you are not going to be able to cling to anything outside of you as a form of safety, security, validation, or approval. This is a journey about living from the inside out, sourced in your God consciousness, embodied in your divinity. And the first part of this is pulling the rug out from under you in many different ways that you have been giving wherever you've been giving your power away. And so this, every time I say the word journey, it's just going to be in air quotes moving forward, okay? Because it does appear as a journey, and ultimately I don't want to plant that seed that it's some long journey, because you can literally just self-realize into your divine nature and live from your divine unity, consciousness, divine presence here and now with no fucking journey. But what I'm sharing here is this video is on obviously for those that have had a more gradual self-realization and integration and purification phase. And so it's not going to resonate with everyone. And so if this doesn't resonate as part of your ascension timeline, then just this video is not for you. So no worries. So where was I? So you're being stripped. You enter the relinquishing phase where you just get stripped of all your attachments, and that can be very, very painful for the ego, obviously, because it's the death of the ego. It's a death of the ego in the way you relate to ego at this point, but you don't really get rid of the ego. The ego is kind of illusory anyways, but it's also a necessary component for having an an expression, an individuated, what appears to be individuated expression of the whole. And it is also very masculine dominant and necessary to play in this world of duality and creation. So, anyways, but when I refer to in this phase, the relinquishing phase of the ego, this is where the ego has been driving the train this whole time, even as you've been waking up and becoming more quote unquote spiritual, right? So you're still operating from you're just operating from a spiritualized ego at this point. And you may have had glimpses or spiritual experiences up to this point, but at the end of the day, you're still operating as a separate sense of self, regardless of how multidimensional you feel that you may be, or that you are seeing. You still are operating as if there's a you and a world out there that you need to navigate somehow in order to go get X, Y, and Z and carve out a better life for yourself. That is separation consciousness. You are life itself. And let's just leave it at that for a minute. But that is what I'm referring to is you still living in the world from a place of subject object relationship and still feeling as if you're this separate person or identity or character or body or whatever, and you are operating in the world. And you need to figure everything out, and you need to go do a lot more energy healing sessions and get certified in this and certified in that, blah, blah, blah. And then you're gonna use all of those as tools and give your power away to them and things like that over time. And those tools were useful, but they eventually also, the ego always comes in the back door and eventually uses everything that was once useful now as a crutch and becomes your bottleneck. So how does this look? It looks like you can become overly dependent on giving all of your power away to, let's just say, crystals or some energy healings, and not even your own energy healing, someone else's energy healing for you, or you give your power away to astrological transits, and Mercury retrograde now means you can't be in your power or something like that. Like you're giving your power away in little ways and big ways. For many of you during this phase, it's also where you would meet, as a catalyst. Not everybody's going to resonate with this, but uh, at a certain point during this relinquishing phase where you enter into deep, dark night of the soul and ego death and start getting stripped of your attachments, codependent love, and any place of external validation, may have also met your twin flame, which is a catalyst to this ascension process and just pours fire, pours gasoline on the fire of all of your abandonment wounds and your fear of betrayal or not being good enough or not being worthy and things like that. So, for all of you that are out there thinking you want to meet your twin flame, please just let me preface this with saying if you knew what that actually meant, you wouldn't want to meet your twin flame. And if you feel like by meeting your twin flame, you're meeting some like lovey-dovey soulmate that's gonna just like see you very clearly and love you and be there for you in all the best ways when you're down and when you're giving your power away, they'll be able to wipe your tears for you and things like that. That is a soulmate connection. And if you have that in your life, then that is beautiful. I'm saying that's not the twin flame ascension catalyst. The twin flame ascension catalyst comes in and blows your shit up. So you cannot run and hide from your abandonment wounds or your core wound of unworthiness anymore. So that happens during this phase. Oh, God, my laptop's about to die. I'm glad I saw that. Okay. Now, what was I sharing? So that phase, as you get stripped and you go through the dark night of the soul, and this can be earmarked by a lot of suffering, it can be earmarked with a lot of fear of death, existential crisis. Your ego is dissolving very, very rapidly, and you are dismantling yourself from the matrix. You may fall into what some refer to as the void, where you really stop caring about things. You maybe even disconnect from your purpose. You kind of just fall off the face of the earth. Some people may feel that it's depression, although it's not depression and you can tell the difference. Like you're being divinely guided to go through a very sacred process. And this is the dismantling, a rapid dismantling of the ego and clearing you from not clearing per se, that might not be the best word, but stripping you of your attachments, right? So this is the relinquishing phase. And what happens after that is you begin to take your power back on a whole new level. This is where you'll often like unapologetically start to take your power back. You will lose interest in the old world ways. Um, and like old systems and structures no longer interest you. So this is you're moving into the sacred in between. Your old life has been crumbling and the rug's been pulled out from under you many times, most likely. It's been earmarked most likely with dark night of the soul, ego death, and many people experience that multiple times. But I know personally, I can just share what's happening over here. Um, and it was a phase of like a year and a half, I think. It was like a good year and a half to be in that relinquishing void phase. Okay. So then you enter the sacred in between, which is the old world just doesn't work for you anymore, which is where a lot of you may be resonating right now, even though some other things that I just touched on might still be popping up because again, there's no hard lines between this. It's you can revisit and like circle back and things like that. But the old world ways of existing and being, the old paradigms no longer work for you. Your old way of living doesn't work. So you may experience like friendships falling away. You may experience you may get fired from your job or you may leave your job. You may move to a new location. You may leave a relationship. You may leave a whole circle of friends, things like that. There's just, you may start to eat differently and things like that. There's just a crumbling of the old timeline is crumbling. And and your new life, the new life that you can feel in your heart and in your bones that you're meant to live as a living, walking, talking, breathing example of embodied divinity, which is who I'm speaking to right now. If you resonate with this, this is part of your dharma, part of your mission is to be a leader of new earth frequency and to live it, to be it. Like you are the portal that new earth is here now through you. And so you are now in the sacred in between and the sacred in between phase is I kind of always use the metaphor you're like a boat out in the ocean, like you've left the old shore of your old self, but you can't see the shore of the new life, but you can feel it. You can feel it and you're being pulled towards it, but you're being asked to trust and you're being asked to surrender to the unknown and you're being asked to surrender in faith. And this is where there's a real surrendering of control and a loosening even more of the grip on the steering wheel. Control is like is one of the things that will be persistent through this process for so many because losing control is like the number one thing that is like so scary for the ego. If you thought your twin flame ascension catalyst was um scary or difficult, like fully surrendering control in the midst of your quantum shift and everything crumbling around you and you have like nothing to hold on to anymore. You're just out at sea floating around in the unknown and you have nowhere to cling to and nothing to hold on to and you're just being asked to anchor into your faith and trust and knowing. Yeah, that's going to kick up your ego. So the ego backlashes during this phase. This is why many of you feel an expansion and a contraction. Expansion and contraction. This isn't you going backwards. Again, keep in mind the ascension process is a spiral, but from a quantum perspective, all timelines are available to you simultaneously, including your highest timeline, and you are literally quantum shifting into a whole new paradigm. So cut yourself some slack. You're moving into a whole new paradigm, a whole new frequency, a whole new way of being. And so There's going to be contraction and expansion. That's part of nature. That's part of this process, but you're literally not dissolving, like as the ego continues to quote unquote dissolve, for lack of a better word, and divine will begins to take over and take the steering wheel. You're shifting from the identity, the performance identity, the survival identity, the one that always needed to hustle to get by or to work really hard or to effort or to prove your worthiness or to prove that you're good enough. Like that identity is dying. And it is very much associated with the wounded identity of the separate sense of self, which is based in separation, consciousness, aka fear-based consciousness, which is why I've said on several videos in several different ways is you can't take you with you, because that wounded identity that thinks you have all of these things to fix and heal and you have to perform and you have to prove your worthiness and all of those things, that identity is collapsing. The new timeline that is your highest divine reality, with you living fully embodied in your divinity and magnetizing everything from that high frequency place, because you are the magnet at that point. That identity exists and you are already entangled with it. That's why you can feel it, because you're already entangled in that timeline. And so identity shifting is going to come into play here in a little bit. But what's happening in the sacred in between, when you're in this boat in the middle of nowhere in the ocean and you can't see the old shore that you've left, aka your old self, your old identity, the wounded identity that comes from fear-based consciousness and separation consciousness, and always trying to fix and figure everything out because there's always a problem to solve, that kind of consciousness, that identity is collapsing, and and everything that's associated with it is collapsing. Relationships, jobs, living situations, like there's nothing for you to cling to over there. And the more you try to cling to anything from the old structures that are trying to collapse, that would be the equivalent of like the tower card, right? In the tarot. And you are like trying to cling to the beams of the tower, like while it's burning. Like it doesn't make any sense. But the ego fears the unknown and losing control. So the ego is going to backlash and try to hold on for dear life. And it's going to backlash. And the way that it backlashes is it tries to hook your awareness with every fear-based limited belief or scarcity template that you've been, or unworthiness template that you've been buying into your entire life. And it's going to hook you emotionally and mentally as part of this purification process, as you are also simultaneously being asked to surrender in full faith and trust in the unknown and in the unseen. This is why I love this metaphor, because when you're in the boat in the middle of the ocean and you can't cling to the old shore anymore, that's like clinging to the tower while it's collapsing. You also can't see. There's all you see is water when you look to the other horizon. Like you don't see land, you don't see rocks, you don't see birds, you don't see trees, you don't see anything. You just see the horizon and you don't know you don't know what's next. Wow, I'm getting full body chills right now. The image that just came to me is I think it's the Eight of Cups, with the picture, either way, regardless, it's the woman. Yeah, it's the image that's coming to mind is a woman that's walking away from all the spilled cups and she's walking towards the sun. I believe that's the Eight of Cups card, but that's the image that's coming through. She's walking towards her sun. She's walking towards her new earth. She's walking to her highest timeline. And again, you're not walking quote unquote to it, but at this, for lack of a better word, phase of the journey, you are walking away from all the spilled cups. That and that's very much tied to emotions, right? So you're moving away from that and you're going towards your sun, and the sun represents your joy, your bliss, the ultimate joy and bliss, right? The ultimate, you're walking towards your highest divine reality. But you can't see what's coming, but you can feel it. And this is what's important to point out at this phase, is that your intuitive knowing is everything. Being able to trust in your knowing is everything. Being able to trust in the unseen before you see proof of anything is everything, because that's what's happening here. You're being asked to do less, be more, trust in the unseen, trust in the knowing, and the more you try to go back to the old shore, the more suffering you experience, the more collapse you experience, because that's just an old structure. It's like it's a template, it's an old paradigm that you just don't even exist in anymore. Your frequency isn't even a match for it anymore, which is why it crumbles and falls away. This is a divine process. There's nothing wrong happening here. You're being aligned with your highest good and God's promise for your life, which is to live your full, embodied, highest expression. And you have answered that call. You have chosen this timeline. That's why you're here right now. And so everything that's crumbled away, every rug that ever got pulled out, everything that feels painful right now, everything that's triggering your old fears of scarcity or unworthiness or fear of not being even like supported, like you're being asked to surrender everything to the unseen and realize ultimately that you are the supply, that God is the supply of all things and God dwells within you. The kingdom of heaven is within. This is what you're ultimately being pointed to on this quote unquote journey, which you already are, and it doesn't have to take a whole lifetime of a journey to get here. But for many, that's part of the play. And that's part of the game of life that you came here to play. And there could be a lot of truth in burning off a shit ton of karma and all of those things. So all of that's been happening, and now here you are at the sacred in between. You can't see what's coming, but you can feel it. Everything else is crumbling. You have nothing to cling to, and yet you don't know where you're going. And everyone in your family or your friend circle, the ones that haven't already fallen away or that you've completely like opted out of communicating with, probably think you're crazy. And they actually will think you're crazy. They're going to think you're delusional because you're going to be really deconditioning from the matrix. And this journey, you see that everything is completely opposite from what we've been programmed to believe about reality and the truth of who we are and how we exist within it. And in actuality, that's not even a true statement because we don't exist within it. It exists within us. But I just want to sometimes I want to share this from trying to share this from both angles, but in truth, it exists within you. In truth, it exists within you. And that's ultimately what you come to see on this journey. And that's backwards to what everybody else believes to be true. They think you exist in the world, right? But in truth, and so that's what they're going to believe to be true is that you exist in the world, they exist in the world, and everything else exists in the world. And they're going to be looking at everything, if they're not on the ascension timeline, as if they are the separate self that is navigating through the world, trying to figure everything out and make everything happen, right? That is where the reverse comes in. So, okay, thank you. That's why that came through. So they're going to see everything backwards, which is why they're going to think you're crazy. But in actuality, you may feel crazy if you buy into that, but actually you are actually becoming more sane because you are actually seeing reality for how it really works. For example, even from a quantum mechanics level, you are starting to see reality for the truth of what it is, which is very malleable and very fluid. And even the things that appear solid are not solid. It's proven. This isn't even woo-woo. This is science. You can go Google it, do your research, study up if that's what you feel called to do. But even what is solid, what appears solid is illusory, and illusory means it's not as it appears, it's not as it seems. It's actually spaciousness. And even when you look out and you see spaciousness and you think, oh, there's space between a you and a them, or you and the building, or you and your laptop you're watching this on, or phone that you're watching on, all of that spaciousness is actually full. It's not empty. And so everything, like I'm saying, is backwards on this as you become more anchored into your truth, your embodied divinity. And so it's going to appear crazy, but you're actually seeing reality for how it really works. Everybody else is going to walk around they're going to think they're in the world and they are trying to get things to happen within it. And they're trying to move around all of the whatever appears as little, you know, components of this reality and move things around in order to get it the way that they want it, right? Like that's separation consciousness. Whereas you already see and know and experience that the world that you see through your naked eye, the world that you're creating, is actually an echo and a reflection of what you are conscious of being. And you've been doing this your whole life just unconsciously. So you've been creating from a default programmed identity rooted in conditioning and falsehoods and untruths that say you are not worthy, you are not good enough, and that you need to go out and achieve more and do more in order to have more so that you can then be seen as more and better and more worthy. And everything is in reverse. That is seeking external validation outside of what appears to be a you in order to make yourself more successful, worthy, valuable, lovable, wealthy, blah blah blah, all the things. And that's how majority of the world is seeing reality. Whereas on this journey, you clearly see that reality is a reflection of what you're conscious of being, which is the good news is that makes it very malleable and fluid. And this is also science. This quantum mechanics and even like the observer effect has shown that by observing and measuring the observer effect states that when you observe matter or measure it, it changes based on the observer. So what's really happening is you're like a broadcaster of frequency, and you can have a very pure channel here of high frequency uh, that is rooted in truth and alignment with divine law and unity consciousness and higher frequency, and that will reflect out and create a reality that reflects that back to you. Or you could be walking around in a very wounded identity or walking around in a sense of separation from everything around you. And that will automatically create a reality from that. So you're always doing it. It's just now that you get to be a conscious, clear signal and broadcaster to the field, to the quantum field, it must reflect back to you what you are conscious of being. This is law. So now you get to play from reality from a higher vantage point, and there's nothing off limits for you. You get to play this game as the conscious creator, the divine creatrix that you are. And even that is not 100% true statement because you're not even creating the timeline that of you living your best life and you know being whatever your version of your best life is, your divine reality already exists. Like I said before, you're entangled with it. That's why you can feel it. So you're not even creating it. So all of that old manifestation stuff, like where you're trying to like make things happen and journal everything like a million different times and affirm your way to success and stuff like that. That may have worked like back in the day, but it doesn't work here in the frequency that you're moving into because you are it. There is no separation between you and there is no separation between you and anything. There's just this. And as you live from your I am presence, you immediately collapse timelines into the identity of what you are conscious of being. And if you are conscious of being abundant and prosperous and flirt like whatever you're conscious of being, you get to play and create. And that's what will be reflected back to you. And so you're taking, and it's not you taking it, right? There's no you here to take it at this point. and this is, we're going to talk about this because this is one of the final threads, is it's not you taking your power back and becoming some new and improved version of yourself. This is again where the ego will take this through the back door and it will become your crutch or bottleneck to you living your divine reality, because the ego will try to latch onto that and make you some new and improved version of yourself. This isn't about putting your highest timeline, your divine reality, you living in your new earth frequency and living your dream life happens through you, and there is no separation between you and that. The you that thinks that you are the separate individual is what dies. This is your funeral. You've been letting go of it and ceasing to cling and allowing it to dissolve for years or decades, but this is the funeral. You have to let the old identity fall away, and the old identity thinks that it is separate. You are not separate from the God that created you. You are one with all things, including the God that created you. And when you fully begin to take your power back and declare from your I am presence what you are here to experience and what it feels resonant for you, you get to select your divine reality. I use this kind of word on a call the other day with a member of Embody the Empress. You get to select. You get to select. Like you have a fresh slate. The old identity has been, you don't play in that paradigm anymore. You now get to select, like you're selecting from a menu, what divine reality you want to play in, because all of them are possible. They all exist, but you actually have to claim it and declare it, but not from the separate self that still thinks you have to prove something or get something to go your way in order to be lovable, good enough, worthy, or valuable, or all whatever, fill in the blank. And so at some point, the direct experience of your divine nature will occur. And it's not an occurrence, but it's kind of weird to talk about. Uh, it can come in the form of what's often referred to as a glimpse. But here's the truth. You're already this. You're already awake. And so what you're seeing is you're not getting glimpses of your divinity where you are anchored in your presence and you are one with all things. You're not getting glimpses of your divinity. That's what it will feel like. And I'm speaking to the experience. It'll feel like you're getting a glimpse of your divine reality and your divine presence. But what's really happening is the separate self that's always been there, like a filter, like a dirty pair of glasses that are distorted that you've been wearing, are just like no longer, it's like the lens has been cleaned. So then you just see the truth for what it is and how it is. And so you're you're already awake. You wouldn't be able to listen to this. You are here now. This is your divine essence, present now, here and now. It's timeless, it's ageless, it's boundless. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to get. There's no problems here. There's no separate self whipping out their spiritual toolkit trying to figure everything out. You're just here now, living as your divine presence all the way. However, at some of the earlier stages of this, it will appear as if you're receiving some kind of glimpse of your divine nature, but in actuality, the lens has been cleansed, right? So you can think of it kind of like your divinity. You've always been divinity. You've always been all of this. This is your creator, I am presence, your divine presence. This is only here and now. This is when you're no longer identified with the little mind, the little tyrant, the little narrator in your mind. Even if the thoughts still come or the mind tries to do something, you see through it and you're not hooked by it. You're not attached to it. It's not sticky to you anymore. It can just be there. Doesn't matter. Um, but you're always here and you've always been here and you've always been awake. And so what's really happening is the lenses to the glasses are cleansed, and so it's really just a degree of clarity that you're always going to be experiencing, and you will experience more and more clarity the more and more you live as this and embody it. So what happens is at some point you may, and I'm not saying this happens for everybody, experience glimpses, what it feels like, or glimpses of your true nature. But what's really happening is your natural presence is just there, no longer being filtered through the dirty lenses that you've been wearing called the little me, with all the problems and the thought patterns that you are clinging to as your identity and all of that. Because when you're in that glimpse, so to speak, there's nothing to report. There's no you there. Only after that you can talk about it, if that makes sense. Um, so what happens is as there's a lot of power at this phase with claiming and recognizing that you are already awake and that this is already your true nature, that you are the awareness and the divine presence that's prior to the form, prior to the thought pattern, prior to the body, prior to whatever the mind is trying to do. There is a power in declaring that you are already here and now. You are the here-ness and the now-ness of now. You are the beingness of now. And you will oscillate. Usually what happens is you can oscillate and it'll feel like you're losing your clarity. It'll feel like you're losing like you could have a glimpse that where you're living in your true nature for a minute, a second, a week. It's different for everybody. And then when it goes away, I had someone mention this on one of the calls the other day. After it goes away and appears to go away, it's like worse than before, because once you get a taste of it and glimpse of your true nature, like all you want to do is go back there. And so then the ego is trying to figure out, how the hell can I get back to that place? How, keywords, how can I get back to that place? That's the trap. It's not a place. And you can't get back to it because you've never left, because you're always this. And I know that sounds annoying, but what happens is there appears to be oscillation, is what I'm sharing. There appears to be oscillation between being the awareness that you are and then being sucked back into the identity. And the problem with that is once you let the genie out of the bottle, it feels very tight and restricting. You can't get the genie back all the way in. You can't. You can't forget. You can't, once the codes of remembrance have been activated at your divine remembrance, you're not going to be able to uh, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. And when you start to oscillate and go back into the identity, and if you're listening to this on the podcast or whatever, my body wants to move forward as I explain this, because that's kind of what it feels like. It's like you're moving into the identity to play the identity game now as a separate sense of self. And it feels like putting on a very tight pair of heels that you already know you're going to get blisters in. It feels very tight and restricting. It feels like, with one client we were sharing, it feels like you're put on a straight jacket, or it just feels like you lost it and you can't get back to it. That's the experience. You lost it and you can't get back to it. And it's very important and powerful to remind, for the self to remind self right now, just with your awareness, bring it back to the fact that oscillating is natural. What happens if you actually cultivate this presence by not filling it with noise? So what happens is the ego could start to try to make you really busy, or be on the phone all the time or constantly scrolling social media or anything that takes you away from being present in the now. If you cultivate this presence and stillness, this ascension with devotion is the best word I can say, with devotion to come back home to yourself through the breath, you will embody this presence more and more until it is the default state. It already is the default state. In truth, it already is this is all there is. You already are this. So it technically is already the default state. Keep in mind, I'm trying to talk about something that can't be talked about. So there's a lot of paradox. The closer you get to the truth, the more paradoxes there are. It's already the default state because you've always been this. It's the same awareness and presence that's been looking through your eyes through every drama and trauma and issue and all the things your whole life. It's been the same presence that was looking through your eyes when you were 7 years old, and it'll be the same presence looking through your eyes when you're 97 years old. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's always here. It's always awake. It's always you here now. So it's already the default. So what appears to happen is that like you're able to rest in this more and more until you just stop oscillating into the separate sense of self. So one of the things that really can click here for you right now is your separate sense of self will never live your dream life. Your separate sense of self will never live your highest divine reality. And your separate sense of self never awakens. The separate sense of self is the illusion, meaning it's not as it appears. It's not as it seems. It's not this fixed identity that is you, that you think that you are. You, the separate sense of self, you, if that's how, and I please don't, if that's not how you, if you already identified as a truth of your nature, then I'm not speaking to you, but if you're identified still as a separate sense of self, just know that the separate sense of self is not going with you where you're headed. That shoreline that you can't see, that is your divine reality, your highest timeline, aka unity consciousness, aka oneness consciousness, aka not two-ness consciousness, meaning you are it. There is no separate sense of self that you need to try to figure out or fix. And so the separate sense of self is not going to wake up on this journey, and it doesn't need to. It's an illusion. It's like just a dirty pair of glasses. And eventually you just clean the glasses and realize it was just like a filter that you've been wearing. You've always been here now as the infinite intelligence and creative life force energy that you are. You just are no longer looking through a dirty pair of glasses. So the separate sense of self just this is, like I said, your funeral. It's the funeral of the separate sense of self. You must be willing to let the old identity die. Like, rest in peace. Like, no more resurrecting that. What comes from this crucifixion that you've just went through and all of the trials and the fiery purification process is the rebirth. And the rebirth is the Christ itself within you, which is one with God and lives as it. You are made in the likeness of your creator. So you're no longer giving your power away to a God outside of you. You are one with the creator, and the kingdom of heaven dwells within you. There's no separation. So the separate self is never going to experience your divine reality, and it's not going to go with you, and it never awakens. Because you're already here. The truth, this is who you are. You're already awake. You're already awake. And that's the quickest way to truly awaken to your divine nature is to realize you're already awake. I'm giving you the cheat codes right now, but if you want it to be another 10-year journey, you can go on a 10-year journey. It'll all lead, all roads eventually lead home to this. So the metaphor that I really like that I'll share here is you're like this little drop in the ocean, or you think you're this little drop in the ocean, and that you think the drop is going to eventually wake up to the fact that it's always been the ocean. But that's not what happens on this journey. It's the ocean, your ocean of being, the truth of who you are, realizes it was never a separate drop to begin with. You've always been this. You've always been here. You've always been whole. You've always been complete. You've always been one with all of it, including all of the little components of everything that are in the ocean. You're one with all of it. All of the other little parent drops, you're one with all of it. And you're all of it. You're all of it. You're no longer appearing, but you can put the glasses on called the separate sense of self, the me self, the small identity self, the one that feels you have all this shit to fix and heal and figure out, and you can put that on. And I'm not discounting that phase of the journey. I just talked about it. There's a lot of purification, alchemy, and all the things on this journey. But at a certain point, you get to decide if you're going to put on the glasses called the separate sense of self, the separate me self, with all of the problems and dramas and all of the heaviness that comes with that. Like, you got to figure everything out. When you take off those glasses and you realize you're the whole, all of it, now divine infinite intelligence gets to run the show unencumbered by the fears and the gripping of the little mind. And it's not like the little mind is more powerful than the infinite intelligence. Obviously, all roads lead home. And the paradox here is that it's the infinite intelligence, the divinity within you, that's choosing the experience that you're having here right now, regardless. So nothing is wrong. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. There's nothing wrong, because whatever experiencing you're having right now is exactly how God wanted to experience through you. What I'm suggesting here is that if you resonate with this sacred mirror, then the divinity of that which you are has decided to realize it's always been awake and never was the drop to begin with. So the divinity of that which you are, which is all things, can now play the game of life just at a higher vantage point. It's a whole new operating system now. The old operating system called old earth, old paradigm doesn't work anymore, because now you are fully anchored in your divine power, your divine confidence, your divine sovereignty. Not this false confidence, fake power, or fake superiority or anything like that, which is how it is distorted when you're operating from the little separate sense of self. No, this is you fully claiming and owning that you are a child of God, an expression of the one, and not no longer denying that truth that lies within you. And this is a felt experience in the now. It is a knowing, it is a direct experience, and you can only be it. So one of the last things that will happen before, that you'll experience before all of this starts to really be your direct experience, is that you will conceptually understand all of this, and you can even talk about it or even teach it, and the mind has compartmentalized it and figured it all out, but it won't be your direct experience. And that's because you're still living from the conceptual mind. The conceptual mind and the mind in general is rooted in duality, which means there's always going to be like this pendulum swinging between the polarities. But as you begin to center and anchor more into your presence, the polarity swing that you used to be on, where it's like the vision that was coming up that I shared with the client the other day in Rise Sister Eyes, it's like, if like you had these two balls hanging on a string right here, and you hit one with it, like it would make the other one bounce, right? And so you're like on this swing, this pendulum swing in duality, like living in duality as if you're part of it, right? Like you're in it. You're in it. And what happens is, as you stop feeding the addiction called the little mind, and you stop going for the dopamine hits, because this is really an addiction, because the mind will hook you with another shot of dopamine to help you figure out your quote unquote future or heal your quote unquote past, but in actuality those don't even exist. It's all just here and now. And so that's just part of the game that you will be sucked into so you can jump back into the mind and do the whole pendulum swing again. And then you'll be seeking that proof outside of yourself and more synchronicities and more signs as if you don't already have enough of those. And anyways, you just go on this, you're just bouncing back and forth between duality, and the more of a high, then it just makes this one go even higher, and then you have more of a low. So you'll notice that uh, as you get hooked on either extreme, you just experience its opposite. But as you begin to center into your neutral, grounded presence of being and living from the present moment of now, embodied in your divinity, you will still have you'll have the remnants of the old world still lingering in your field and hooking you here and there, but it'll be less and less and less and less. And so what happens is, I was showing this, it goes like this. At first, everything's very chaotic. You're very emotionally swinging all the time and purging and purifying and all this kind of stuff. And then, like, eventually you come home to your truth and your grounded presence, and the swing just gets less and less. And you are now in what I call sacred neutrality. Sacred neutrality is your grounded presence. And the first thing the mind will do is come in the back door and tell you, this is boring. But I want all the highs, but I want all the things. And that's fine. If that's the case, then you can take that hook and go jump back on the pendulum swinging and go for another ride. It's your life experience. God's living it through you. So whatever, there's no wrong choices. You can go on another pendulum ride. You know what I mean? Go do it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're on this ascension timeline, eventually you're going to get burned out of that and you're going to stop taking that invitation, or not. Maybe you don't, but a lot of you are going to stop taking that invitation and come home to yourself and rest in your sacred neutrality and grounded presence. So when the mind tells you this is boring or that there's nothing to do here or it's not going to get anything figured out here or your life's going to crumble and go to shit if you don't get up and do something or hustle or perform or fix and figure everything out and action more and effort more and all the things. When you don't buy into those hooks, because again, the mind is going to try to hook you, either mentally or emotionally, try to hook you into the old paradigm, the old timeline, which is fizzling out at this point. So it's very important to stay anchored in your truth. And at some point, you have to be willing to shut the door entirely on the voice of fear or doubt, because that's going to rear up and backlash as you anchor into your present. But as you see through that and it no longer now has power to hook you, the mind will slowly like settle and it becomes more peaceful, more peaceful, more peaceful. And then you can use the mind as the tool that it was designed to be as part of this human expression, but it's no longer the tyrant that's ruling your life, keeping you bouncing back and forth between the pendulum swinging. Does that make sense? And so at some point, you have to surrender the addiction that you have to the very juicy, very sexy, very convincing storyline and narrative that keeps you hooked into future projections or past healings or and all the things and everything between past memory or trying to figure everything out, everything that keeps you jumping up to the mind. And you're going to have to divorce that in order to come into inner union. You're going to have to divorce the mind in that regards, the little mind that tries to tell you all that in order to come into your heart space, which is one with all things. And I'm not talking about like your physical heart or your heart chakra, even though your heart chakra is a bridge between heaven and earth and the higher chakras and the lower chakras. I'm talking about coming into your grounded presence, which is your creation portal. This sacred neutrality you move into when you are no longer triggered by the external world. The clear sign that you're here is that you are now the eye of the mother effing storm. You are walking in calmness and peace, despite the fact that your highest divine reality has not materialized yet. You might be seeing the shoreline now. In the old metaphor I shared earlier, you might be seeing the shoreline. Maybe you can hear the birds, and you can maybe see some trees or something like that, but you're now anchored in your peace. You're anchored in calmness. You're anchored in your faith. You're not giving any airtime to the voice of fear or doubt. And what that is doing on a quantum mechanics level is it is fine tuning your signal to your divine frequency, your most authentic, divinely inspired frequency, your authentic frequency, however you want to word it. It's fine tuning you to your divine frequency that is automatically being picked up by the field and reflected back to you. And you will start to see that reflected back to you in the 3D world, even, but what's happening is you're collapsing timelines around the old identity and your highest divine reality that you are already entangled with is coming more online because your signal that you're broadcasting is more pure, is more clean, is no longer, you're no longer giving the field static, so to speak, because you're giving the universe lip service because you're still living attached to this old identity and all the fears and the doubts and everything hooking you, even though you're saying with your mouth that you are here for and declaring this, this, and this for your life, but you're feeling the exact opposite. Like everything is starting to be congruent. You're starting to have coherence, is a good word, between the mind and the heart and what the body is feeling and the signal that you're broadcasting, which means it is inevitable. It must reflect back into your experience. So I have one more thing. I hope this is okay, yeah, it is recording. I was going to say, if this wasn't recording, I have zero. I was not even going to attempt to try to record it again. I was just going to have to go do something else because there's no way I could recreate this. Um, One thing that's coming up that I want to share for those of you that feel like this is really resonating at this part is the external, like I said before, your inner trusting knowing. Inner trust and knowing is everything. One of the last threads of the illusion is that you need any kind of proof outside of you. So the synchronicities are fun and fine, and they're still fun and fine. All of this is fun and fine, right? All of it gets to be a big game that you get to play. It's fun. And the synchronicities are there, but you're no longer needing them, keyword needing them, and you're no longer seeking them. And you got to be honest with yourself there. You don't need the addictive dopamine hit anymore by seeking out more confirmations and synchronicities. Have you ever noticed that you already get blasted with synchronicities, but yet you still need more? You still need more confirmation and you still need more proof, even though when you land on something, all it does is confirm back to you what you already know to be true. Isn't that a sign that maybe you don't need that anymore because everything's just reflecting back to you what you already need to be true? That's one thing to think about. The other thing is when you are seeking it out, are you being the one that already has it? Are you already one with your divine reality? Or are you being the one that is still holding it outside of yourself as separate, something outside of you that you have to go get or achieve? And so the one of the last threads of the illusion, when you start to pull on this, the whole illusion unravels, and that is the need for proof. you no longer need any external proof. You are the proof. And your certainty that you are a living, walking, talking, breathing expression of the One, that you are a child of God, that you are here now in your God power and presence, and that you select what your divine reality is going to reflect back to. But it's not coming from ego anymore. It's coming from your I am presence, because that's all, you know what I mean? Like, that's what you are embodying now. And so you will go through a phase where you have to shut the door, yes, not only on doubt and fear, but anything that gives your power away. You will no longer negotiate with things that give your power away. You won't be able to play in the old paradigm anymore. You won't be able to entertain doubt or fear or anything. And this is really going to be, when I speak to this, like, this is the death of the seeker. And at any point, you can set it down, but the seeker is it's in a very addictive energy. And the mind knows exactly how to hook you back into it. And it'll play on all of your fears or insecurities. And it'll just keep you looping in the wounded identity of the separate sense of self. And the reason I say it's wounded identity is because it's always going to come from feeling separate from the God source within you. And there's nothing boring about being anchored in your God essence. So back to what I said earlier, when the mind tells you this is boring, it's the opposite of boring, actually, because boring doesn't even exist anymore, because every moment is here now. There's how boring doesn't even exist. And even the simplest things, like, are beautiful. There's nothing boring here, and there's no lack of power here. There's nothing weak about your God essence, your goddess energy. I like to combine that God essence as goddess frequency. There's nothing boring about your goddess frequency. There's nothing that's like weak about your frequency. There's nothing, your goddess frequency. There's nothing that's complacent about your goddess frequency. So when your ego comes in the back door and tries to tell you all these stories about how your life's not going to work out if you don't take control again, and that's what it uses to suck you back into the identity entity, this illusory entity that you think that you are when you really are all of this. The mind's going to hook you and say those things and it's going to go down kicking and screaming in a lot of ways it's going to try to get your attention, and it's going to use very custom tailored hooks for you that are made just for you based on all of your insecurities and fears and delusions that you've been buying into. And it's just part of the process, but this is where it's very important to have a heightened state of awareness. Be here now. All of the rest just falls away. All of, there does seem to be a very powerful, profound shift that occurs when you really shut the door on doubt, fear, or needing proof, and you begin to really challenge that inner sense of unease that is constantly needing another shot in the arm of dopamine or another hit of in order to keep the addiction alive. It's going to feel like you're breaking free from an addiction, because you are. The mind is very addictive, and you've been living from it and identified as it your whole life. It's going to feel very addicting, and it's going to feel very convincing and very sexy to get just pulled back into the identity. There's nothing boring here. There's no lack of power here. There's no lack of healthy discernment here. This isn't you just turning into a ball of complacency where you now become the cosmic doormat and you have zero preferences or anything. You still have preferences. You still have healthy discernment. You actually have very wise discernment. Your bullshit detector goes through the roof because you automatically are just, you can feel frequency on such an innate like level. You can feel it so quickly and easily, like alignment and resonance, not alignment and resonance. And you can feel it so quickly. So there's wise discernment. There's healthy boundaries, but not from the sense that you have to defend yourself. That's coming from the separate sense of me, and that's very exhausting if you feel you have to constantly defend yourself. Your frequency rises and becomes a natural boundary and attracts in other like frequencies and the reality that is a reflection of that, because that's what the field does. The field is very obedient and it just reflects back to you the signal that you are broadcasting. That's why things that are not in vibrational alignment with you naturally fall away. So your frequency becomes the only boundary setting mechanism that you need. That doesn't mean you won't have healthy discernment. You will have healthy discernment. You will have preferences. You know, it's like I prefer hot climates over cool climates, for example. And when I say I'm not speaking as like Sarah. I'm just speaking and using language. And you can use the word, this is important to say. You can use the words I and me and my, but you no longer believe them. So this is one thing that I hear this so often, and it was that I was just on a call the other day, and this was mentioned too, that you can be abiding in your divine presence until you have to start communicating with people. And that's because people that are not on the ascension timeline or don't are not, they're just going to suck you into story, and they're going to suck you into narratives, and they're going to suck you into past and future. You know, like the entire 3D matrix is designed that way. Like if you go look with a very high discerning eye, wise eye, at anything that you see in this 3D reality reflecting back, it's all designed to hook you into the separate sense of self that needs to be more in order to be more successful, lovable, or good enough. Like everything results around like how much you can obtain, what you can get, what you look like, what you're doing, like what you're not, like comparison, like all the things. The entire matrix is designed this way. So what I was saying is when you're talking with other people and you want to remain as presence, because this is part of you fine-tuning your presence, is being able to embody your divinity in any situation, and you will oscillate in this as you do, but you can use I, me, my, but you don't have to believe it. Like you can still be resting as presence while you're having a conversation with someone and use the words I, me, and my and not get sucked into the identity. That's just something that was coming through. So, yeah. So, uh, the need for proof will dissolve and you will be the eye of the storm right before you shift into your highest divine reality. You will be in calmness. You will be in your sacred neutrality. You will be in peace. You will be in a sense of fulfillment. You will be not trying to control the outcome. And it's going to require a complete surrender, but you can't force the surrender and you can't make the surrender happen. It's like, it's so paradoxical to talk about. The surrender just happens itself. The letting go of the declinging is a good word. The declinging from all of the attachments, um the unhooking from all of the hooks, right? Like this is where it is. Like in with your awareness, when you're hooked, that's where the work is, right? If there is any work, it's with awareness. Like the unhookings become less and less. The trigger, like there's not even like at this point, like there's not even triggers to even worry about, because you just are there's either just resonance or there's not resonance. There's not this big story or narrative that you need to go down this big rabbit hole on. Um, it's just seen through. When you're a seeker, everything needs to be compartmentalized and figured out and wrestled to the ground and reverse engineered and getting to the root of everything, blah, 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 blah. And like I said, that's part of it, part of this apparent journey, but you're not meant to live through that phase forever unless you are. But like some people's experience in this 3D reality game of life that we're playing right now, they're not on an ascension timeline. So some humans on this timeline, or some humans in this incarnation, they're not on an ascension 5D ascension timeline. So I'm not speaking to everyone. I'm speaking to those that are on the 5D ascension timeline. So not everyone is meant to resonate with this, but you are for a reason. And if you've made it this far in, I don't even know how long this is. It seems pretty long, so I think I'm gonna jump right now. It's before it gets too long. But this is for specifically you. Like this is specifically for you. There are so many different nuances and caveats to this that can hook you and then have you spiraling for longer potentially than necessary, because there's always different timelines available to you. You can't get it wrong. There's always, all roads eventually lead home. If you've landed here, though, you are on the 5D ascension timeline. You are here to wake up to, or rather say the divinity within you is here to wake up to itself, and you are here to be fully embodied in your divinity as your divinity and be the living transmission of divinity in human form. That's part of your path. That's part of why you're still resonating with this. And you're likely here to share your sacred medicine with the world and your gifts and all the things that light you up. This is your divine reality you're stepping into, that you are now aligning with, or collapsing time around, whatever words you want to use. You're just not going to be able to take the separate self with you. And there's so many nuances and ways that awareness can get hooked by the very juicy, very sexy, very convincing storylines and narratives and timelines that and paradigms that are outdated now and not part of where you're going. And so I guess I'll end it with that. If you want support on this journey with someone who has walked this path and is expanding into more in this new earth timeline, I have several different containers available, different levels depending on the level of support and proximity that you are looking for. So drop me a comment wherever you're listening to this. If you're listening to this on the podcast, come over to either YouTube or Instagram and DM me if you have any questions. But drop me a comment if this resonated, and if you want to work together and you want to get into a container of higher frequency with other women that are walking this path, that automatically calibrates you to a higher frequency just through resonance, because this whole thing works on frequency and resonance, including the old timeline that you're leaving and the new timeline that you're moving into, quote unquote moving into, right? Like that's not what's really happening, but you know what I mean? I'm just using language here. Everything works on frequency and resonance. So if this resonated with you and you want to get in a container that's completely anchored in a higher frequency, we're not playing in old paradigms, and you want to be in resonance with other frequency holders and play this game of life from a higher vantage point consciously as you shift into your new earth 5D timeline. There are different containers I have available based on the level of support and proximity that you are looking for. So you can DM me on Instagram at Spiritual CEO if you have any questions. You can DM me the word 5D and I can get you those different containers, or you can check out the links wherever you're listening to this, or drop me a comment wherever you're listening to this. And I think that's it for now. Until next time, namaste.